Okay, I wanted to check in with you guys and give you guys a week 2 update. As promised, I did go over the week 1 quiz. So what I did was I went in and really took a good look at. I have the ability to look at the item analysis and see and look at each question and what percentage of the class got wrong. So some of these you can see here, like the one on media criticism, 72% of you got that question right. So I didn't look too hard at those. Here's one, everybody got the one on cultural imperialism. So I didn't look too hard at those. I looked at the ones that were under 50%. So for example, when a company owns different parts of the same industry, it's vertical integration. In the case of some of these, it was right in the book. When you look on page 15 of the text, it's right there where it says vertical integration is when a company owns different parts of the industry. So there was a mixed bag basically for quiz 1. Some questions were missed just because you missed it in the reading. Another example was the question on Grand Theft Auto, which was right on page 30. It kind of gives you both cases that some studies say it does lead to violence, some say it doesn't, and it was just missed. Another one was the American Soldier Study, page 35. Applied research, also on page 35. The baseline effect, which a lot of people missed. The baseline effect says that media influences us whether we know it or not. That was right on page 48. The question on the studies of Stephen Johnson, where he talked about how the current state of media is actually a good thing for us. Most people picked one thing, but the answer to that one was all of these, because he talked about how TV shows and video games were actually a good thing and had a positive influence on society. So some of them were missed because you need to do a better job of taking notes on the reading. However, and there was some, before I get into the however, there was a couple other ones. Gatekeepers, a lot of people miss the concept of gatekeepers. Remember, gatekeepers, they're involved in mass media, not interpersonal communication. If we were speaking to each other, sitting in a circle in our classroom, there's no gatekeepers because you're hearing everything that the other person is saying. Gatekeepers occur in mediated communication, like television or radio or even the internet. Gatekeepers might be the example that was used in lesson one was like the governments of China. For example, in China, you can't access Facebook. That is the government acting as a gatekeeper, deciding what information you have access to and what information you don't. Another example was Iran. During the election several years ago, the state television wouldn't allow the images of the protests in the street to get out. They are deciding what information you see and what you don't. So that was the concept of gatekeepers. That was one that was missed by a number of you. Another one was on Marshall McLuhan. People missed technological determinism. Remember at the end of lesson 1, what McLuhan is saying is basically the media is the message. How you get the message has a greater impact on society than the message itself. So for example, television, which was what he was really referring to in a number of ways, because it was having such a great impact on society when he was doing this writing. So the medium of television has a greater impact on society than any message that television can convey. It's the medium of television. You could make the same argument on the internet. Messages are carried over the internet all the time. But when you take the concept of the internet as a whole, that has a bigger impact on society than any one message carried over the internet. So that's what technological determinism means. It will appear again on the midterm. So some of these that were missed, like Grand Theft Auto's influence, the American Soldier Study, especially the baseline effect. I can guarantee you I'm going to ask you about the baseline effect on the midterm. Vertical integration. These things that I felt were clearly pointed out in the book that people got wrong. I didn't do anything with them. I'm just pointing them out. so that you can review. However, there were about 6 questions where the wording was slightly off. There was one where it was just the one on correlation was just an angel error. So there was 2 to 3 questions, 3. But not everybody on this quiz, keep in mind, got the same questions. They're from a pool. Everybody gets a random 30 out of that pool. So there were 3 questions on cultural studies that everybody got full credit for. The Wortham question that came up in the questions forum, or the Gerbner question, that everybody got full credit for. It was poorly worded. Same with the Wortham question. The angel error was on correlation. So for those, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that was 7 questions that were regraded. Again, not everybody got those 7 questions. Like I said, they're taken from a pool. So if your grade didn't go up, everybody that had any of those 7 questions got full credit for it, regardless of what you answered. So if anyone's grade didn't go up, please let me know. If anybody sees anything that still doesn't look right, please let me know. But I think I've addressed all the problems. Okay, so moving on to the WikiLeaks discussion. Great discussion so far. It's a really interesting topic because there's no right or wrong answers. So I'm gonna ask you some additional questions just to kind of keep the conversation rolling. Things to keep in mind as this conversation and discussion continues. Farlene brought up a really great point. She said, "Oh, it's a case of shooting the messenger. Assange is the messenger." So I asked this in response. When you look at how some of this information was obtained by Assange, like one, it was a disgruntled private that hacked into a computer that took all of this information. Well, is this the same as if somebody steals a bunch of DVD players and gives them to you for free, and you start giving them to your neighbors? That would be a crime. So redistributing stolen goods is a crime. Is it the same as information? It's an interesting question because technology is changing so quickly that sometimes laws aren't always in place to deal with it. But we do know that distributing intellectual property, if I rip a DVD of a feature film and I give it to you, and I give you a digital copy, an illegal digital copy of it, and you in turn distribute that digital copy to a bunch of other people, and they never even know about me, but they could come after you for distributing that, even though you didn't ask me to give it to you. I just gave it to you, and you weren't the one that illegally ripped it. I was. You'd still be in trouble because of the way the laws are set up. So should it work the same way for WikiLeaks? It's an interesting question. Emitan brought up this point, and again, if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, I'm really sorry. But she brought up this great point about the First Amendment and that he's not doing anything illegal. Well, remember, when we go back to week 1, not all speech is protected by the First Amendment. The example in last week's lesson was pornography. It is not protected free speech. So the government has already established limits on what's free speech and what's not. Later on in the course, when we talk about the Westboro Baptist Church and what they do, they've been sued? Should their antics be protected free speech? So the government is establishing limits on what's considered free speech and what's not. So is this or should it be protected free speech? Should there be limits? Several people brought up the fact that he's exposing nefarious activities by the government. Is there a right way or a wrong way to expose nefarious activities by the government? So here we have a case of Assange where he's being prosecuted or attempted to be prosecuted by the government. Whereas you look at like the case in the Watergate scandal, Woodward and Bernstein exposing the illegal activities of the Nixon White House. They were heroes. Is there a difference? For those of you who are interested in doing the extra credit assignment next week, it's going to be on fair game, which was the outing of CIA agent Valerie Plame. Um, is there and I'm going to ask you the same question if you choose to do that assignment. Was the Washington Post responsible because they outed a working CIA agent? So these are interesting questions to think about. If he has a right to expose government secrets and if he's protected by the First Amendment, again, think about what limits there should be, if any. If he was publishing nuclear launch codes or the location of loose nukes that in Eastern Europe that terrorists could possibly get a hold of, would that change your mind? Where are those limits, or should there be any at all? So I know Amber and Emily also brought up the idea of he's just the middleman for this information. He's distributing it. He's not stealing it. But again, think about that the analogy I drew to stolen goods and distributing stolen goods, whether it be the truckloaded DVD players or the feature film ripped from a DVD. Are those valid comparisons, or is this somehow different? So just some things to think about as you continue the discussion. The discussion's great so far. I've really enjoyed reading your thoughts on it. And then I'll reconnect with you after the weekend, and we'll wrap this discussion up. Also, remember that you have a blog assignment due this week. It's week 2 on banned books. So there's the link. And pick one book that's been censored and present an argument condemning or supporting the censorship of that book. So again, have a great weekend, and I'll reconnect with you early next week.